Hi everybody and welcome to my video today. So this is going to be another reflection piece. So it's going to be based on UX Team of One and my experience of being UX Team of One whilst just starting out in UX. Now, this topic came about in terms of myself doing a conference this week for the Mobile UX London conference, which was amazing. And I did a talk based on digital storytelling for remote teams. And this experience came from myself again, as I just explained, being new to UX and just starting out in a remote team. And it wasn't just about being a remote team in terms of my own department, so I'm within the product team, but it was also about understanding how utilising user data to create better stories for connecting yourselves with other departments when trying to create a user experience project. So, for example, working with engineers, working with customer service or success teams, working with marketing. It's defining how you can translate the data to correlate to other teams to make a more cohesive UX team, even though you might be just one person in a team. And this has been a massive learning curve. So I've been, I suppose, part of the UX community for the past 18 months going on, give or take. And it's been interesting to see how much I've learned and developed over these past 18 months. But I think this has been the biggest challenge so far. Although I'm enjoying it, I think it's an amazing experience and challenge. But it's interesting to see how, I suppose, UX theory when doing projects voluntarily or even working for UX bootcamp, and how it works, I suppose, in a real life environment when there is actually a low UX maturity. So my company has dipped in and out of UX based practices within the past couple of years and trying to integrate that within the product function. But now it's been time to sort of integrate a bit more of these practices within the function and just develop it a bit more further. And this is where I'm really excited about, because it's a challenge for me and it's something where I can grow and learn with my experience, but then also gain a bit of knowledge in terms of how to grow a UX team. So for myself, it's interesting to see how, although I am deemed the UX team of one, although I'm a UXer and a product manager, which is two juxtaposing roles, I would say. I'm looking after a product, making sure that the functionalities are there, looking at user stories, looking at working with engineers to make sure that tasks are done on time, making sure that both client needs are met and deal with any scenarios that come in. Then there's also the other side of it, so it's the user research side of things. So it's looking at metrics, understanding quantitative data, looking at analytics tools, defining what are the key things we're looking to measure when changing, creating user research projects, defining who the user is. It's interesting to see that products just don't have one key user. You'll find that you'll have 4 or 5 different users, defining the process, defining research repositories, looking at understanding a bit more about communicating what UX is. I find that as one of the key challenges I've had to tackle so far in terms of dealing what UX is, because there seems to be a confusion. It's like with everything, everybody got confusion, oh, this is not my job role, this is not what I do. But it's all about integrating, okay, and how can I integrate these best practices? With UX and UI, there's been oh, can you look at this? Does this make the user experience? And it's well, you're asking me to review the UI rather than UX, which is good because you sort of can, from the user research and interviews, you can find, okay, is this right or is something needs tweaking from the user? But it's just that education where I think this is going to be slowly integrated with the business. It's not going to be an overnight thing. And this is what I kind of want to sum up one thing with the team of one so far. Is the fact that you don't have to do this on your own, and it's not going to be there overnight. Like I said in the live Q&A, that I'm one of those impatient people. I want things done yesterday. But with the UX stuff, integrating in the business in terms of increasing the maturity within your organisation, it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to happen. It's a marathon, not a sprint, and it's all about integrating the small practices within the team itself. So I can give a really good example, and I think this is an amazing learning experience I've learned so far within my team. So we did some user research for a product for one of my colleagues who's a product owner for another product. And so the task was to do some user research. And it was great because we asked some specific questions about how they used it, and it's all about increasing engagement within the product itself. And that initial discovery phase was amazing, but this is what I learned so far. When I had to present the ideas to a senior stakeholder, there was a bit of a backlash because the information I presented wasn't detailed enough. And that's the thing when you do user experience and user research, really find out what information the stakeholder wants. And you should be working with the product owner to, I suppose, work together with them to define the discussion guide and define the findings, what were the key findings, and work together in terms of what the next steps are, because that's what I failed to do. But it's a massive learning curve because it was interesting to see what kind of information they wanted and what next steps we were doing, because then they can refine in terms of what the key priorities are going forward. That was the whole point. Because then that's the whole initial discovery phase. Then we go into more the defining, what kind of key problems and functions we need. It's interesting when you do the generative user research studies for this kind of products where we've never really interviewed a user before. It's interesting to define. You need to really ask those 5 whys, and you can't really do it on your own. You need somebody else, like a product owner, or manager, or someone in a similar status, or even like an engineer on that department. Bring them in so they can help facilitate it. So get them to write notes. Make sure you record it, because then you can focus on facilitating the actual research itself. So interviewing people, define that key why. So, for example, we've had people asking for functions added to the product, and it's great adding these functions, but after a while these functions are going to be made redundant, and it's like putting plaster on a wound. It's not going to solve it if you've chopped a leg off. Really weird analogy, I know, but you need to define the key root cause of what happens. So it's asking that why. Is that function necessary, or is it to do with the flow itself? And then you can define what the key theme is of what somebody wants. So why do they want that feature? Okay then, because I want to save time. Why do you want to save time? Because I need to get clients there. Well, why do you need to get clients that quickly done? Because it will build trust. Well, why do you want to build trust? Because we're going to make it builds that reputation, and it's building that why until you get to the real root causes of the problem. Because then that causes key themes that you can define what the user wants within the flow, defining a bit more about the structure. But the user interviews itself, I'm just going on a bit of a detour, is really good to define the 3 or 5 tasks that a user wants to do within the product itself, and define in terms of how they're going to use the product going forward. I wouldn't say user interview per se is good for doing persona. No, they're really good for personas, not good for user journeys, because you can't define where their frustration is within the journey unless you see it for yourself. Because then if you can record it, you can get empathy in terms of, okay, this is how they go through the user flow, identify the key frustrations. So that's a little bit of a detour on that one. But yeah, it was a really good learning curve in terms of understanding, working together a bit more with product manager and defining what key themes going forward and how we can refine the research to create and design tasks going forward. So that was my UX team of 1 in terms of that experience. Now I'm going to flip on to what I did for the conference with my talk, which I said at the beginning was all about understanding how data can be utilised for cross-functional teams. So going back when I first started doing user research, again, generative for my own product, I did some user research in terms of defining what people thought about the product, and this is another learning curve as well. I was leading them on, and it should be leading questions. It should be them being naturally answering the questions, what they kind of needed. Although we got some really good results in terms of understanding key features required. Again, it needs deeper research, but I digress. But with the UX team of 1, again, this is something that I want to bring on board in terms of working in a team and working together with developers. Now, I learned from one of my UX mentors is to try and work 2 sprints ahead of your developers or engineers or whoever you're working with, designers, but make sure they're involved with the research. Understand what is the anything they find, because for me, I only just know a little bit about the product. They have years of experience about the product. And it's getting their ideas in terms of understanding what key problems are within the system or what they think is going to be a key problem within the system. And make sure you involve them within the process. Make sure that they understand what's going on. If you find out, oh, I've just done user research, well, why have you done that? What purpose does it have? And why haven't you told me you did user research? Because that, I suppose, breaks the trust within the cycle. And you need to work with them to define what the key problems are. If anything they know in terms of why you're doing this, what benefits can happen to them, and just define it a bit more so they can get involved in terms of timelines and what they expect in terms of what key learnings going forward or what is going to be added going forward. What is the artifact? Is it going to be user stories? Is it going to be functions? Is it going to be about defining user flows? Just define with them what's going to happen next and then work with them in terms of building that structure and that strategy with them. So with the UX team 1, it is making sure that you integrate not just your role, you don't work in silo, spread the work across, communicate, be loud and proud of what you're doing because it's amazing work. And I think having that, being that loud and proud will help to make sure that UX is more educated within the business itself. So I think tools to make sure that you work together effectively within UX Team 1. So make sure that you utilize the tools available. So for us, it's like using Slack to communicate user findings within the teams, just promoting the work we're doing, creating a research repository, which we've done via Confluence, which is a really interesting way of concept because I've heard, like, for myself, I use Notion for putting tasks I'm going to do, but Confluence, we've tried to make something where it's on it, everybody can reach it and then sort of define what's going on at the moment, what research has been done so far, what videos have been done so far, just as a library to find out what things are going on and where, just so we can promote it and be like, oh, this is what we're doing, this is what we've done. I say Teams is very good for recording. It's got transcripts as well in case anything we've noted, and can translate back into the Word document for research. So that's the tools, and also Jira. And this is something I'm going to work on going forward, is creating a Jira board for UX work in terms of defining what user research needs to be done. So looking at, is it internal researchers, is it product based? It's kind of going forward just to make it a bit more sleeker than what it is now. In terms of working as a team, make sure that you communicate. Again, it's more, the underlying theme is communication. Just to make sure you communicate with your team what you're doing, looking at any key pain points. Don't feel like you have to do this on your own. So get them involved with defining the discussion guide. Get them involved with doing a usability test in terms of not just going through it themselves as a non-user, but going through it in terms of understanding a bit more about, what's going to happen, anything to refine that key research questions to get better results, working with them to get data. It's just all about making sure that you work together, creative teams, to know what's going on, and make sure that you understand where you are integrated within each role or team going forward. So that was a very detailed video I realised I've done today in terms of, but I think I feel really passionate about it because it's something that I've learned, but it's brought my passion back for UX. I mean, it hasn't gone, it was just more that, okay, and this is why I'm doing it and I love this. So it's helping those of you who kind of are in that, might be in a similar situation, in terms of understanding that UX Team 1 isn't necessarily just a UX Team 1. Make sure that you build that connection and communication with your team. Make sure you understand the tools, how you can get others involved with the roles. It can be educational purposes. And yes, hopefully that will, from my learnings, can help you should you be in a situation. So on that note, have a great day and keep smiling, and I shall speak to you all soon. Ciao for now.